can't do it. I can bring it out of you!
This can't be real.
An endless expanse of cold emptiness, devoid of life and humanity. An unfocused gaze, marked by raw, dying eyes that contained unendurable suffering. This is all that exists for Mythra right now. The devastation of Auresco is the violation of the very essence of her soul. The death of a civilization she had privately grown to admire, of citizens that she had begun to know by name. The death of her role as Alrest's hope, their light against eternal darkness. The death of Milton, of the only pure relationship she had managed to find. The death of her oath, her promise. For in her eyes, Milton must have fallen alongside Mikhail, fallen alongside the capital, perhaps alongside the kingdom itself, reduced to ashes, ashes and dust. The simple truth of this crashes into a mind that had already been overwhelmed by chaos, and she shatters under the weight of what Malas has done. This is not a wound that could be undone or mitigated, as some of her previous psychological states have been. This is an all-encompassing, violent, and uncontrollable mental collapse. She leans back, clutching her head in pain, as it burns under the torturous memories of what she has lost, her conscious mind torn to shreds. In a way, as this occurs, it's almost as though the pneumacore has short-circuited, rendering Mythra mentally blank and operating off of a wild storm of incoherent, contradictory directions. Incapable of processing a circumvention to its focus as a member of the Trinity, only instinct remains within the metaphorical scrap heap that her core drive has been reduced to. Operating under that instinct, all pretenses are dropped. There are no morals, no restraint, no complex thought that could hinder the effectiveness of her immediate self-weaponization. Mythra's inner conflict finally decided upon a victor. Malas would force her to become the Aegis that she was always meant to be, no matter what it cost her soul.
That's it! Perfect! That's the power that our father gave us! It's what the world has cried for since its birth! Me, you, we're here to give them what they want!
The soaring rostrum is the climax of the Aegis War, not the end. Those involved in the conflict will have their loose ends forcibly snapped days from now, when a signal, strategically given by the newly appointed Praetor Amalthus, after his only opposition is either dead or sealed away, sends an army across Alrestian airspace to exterminate the Tornan remnant at Specia. But the climax, it is not a pleasant or graceful climax. It isn't the triumphant victory that Mythra was resonated to achieve. Just the opposite, in fact. The Aegis War was never rooted in exultant confidence, never victorious or at ease in its tone. Its orchestrator never intended it to be. What was happening in these moments was why the Aegis War had been brought to this point in the first place. It is the reason why Malas chose to delay the end of the war. The battle at the soaring rostrum had always been, from its very inception in the final minutes of the assault on Auresco, Malas's calculated attempt to control the flow of Mythra's future. The circumstances that had been created were an irresistible bait. Their clash was isolated, the city to their backs, densely populated and defenseless, all on a titan that was dear to the hearts of everyone opposing Malas's crusade. Mythra had been delicately manipulated into viewing this confrontation as her only opportunity to challenge her counterpart's interpretation of their purpose, and it was constructed as a decisive finale that played out on his terms, where only his destruction would end the war. The soaring rostrum was the perfect mental trap. By fighting at all, Mythra lost. Both Aegises are now alone, surrounded only by the cage of suffocating metal that they commanded. The act of war itself pours darkness into Mythra's heart, deepening the permanent wound to her psyche that limits her perception. And she has no malice towards Torna, no hatred, not the slightest ill will towards the citizens that began to fine-tune her views on humanity. She's only targeting the threat to her well-being. In this case, the Aegis soaring erratically around Torna, goading her into responding with violence. Brilliantly gleaming ether collects at the base of her artifice's cannon. Crackling energy radiates away from Siren as a primal scream of horror and agony is torn from the depths of her soul. Her weapon swings to face Malos, in front of the vulnerable Titan below. In a twisted imitation of her counterpart, Mythra opens fire and Tornans die, all across the Titan, all in the span of a few seconds. Tornans die.
No. You're wrong. I don't...
Really?
Mythra stood within her artifice, suspended in the sky, motionless. Her eyes reflected the blazing horror of the smoking ruin beneath her, the landscape that had been scarred by the very same machine that now locked the culprit within its hellbound depths. To prove their destructive nature, Malos had avoided facing her on an equal plane. The devastation she now faced had been wrought by her hand, alone. She, and no one else, had worked to fulfill everything that she stood against, and all it had taken was a push in the right direction. She could hear herself speak, but the words carried no conviction, no confidence. They were false, just as her supposed values were.
Then I'll just cast the claim, all the destruction for myself!
Malos's words were brutal and unforgiving, but they were true. Even if Mythra stopped now, renounced her participation in this war, it wouldn't matter. It would make no difference. Fate would take its natural course. The Aegises were a pair of Endbringers, after all. Her partner would pick up where she left off. Malos was suffocating her, mentally torturing her, with an iron grip of traumatizing reality. Hopelessness ruthlessly strangled her soul. Her tattered heart could withstand no more. For the first time, tears began to fall freely. But no one was there to comfort her. No one was there to support her. She had betrayed them all. Her eyes burned with a vision of what could be. The flashing images made little sense, but they didn't need to. She could feel the distant sense of love and support echoing from the flow of the future all the same. It was something pure, something that she, as an Aegis, did not deserve, and it was something she desperately needed as the depths of her despair cut off her control over her own body. Her head rang with a silent scream as Artifice Siren followed the only order that was still in effect from its now inactive operator. The threat still existed. The Pneuma Core would eliminate it, with or without its manifestation, even if it betrayed everything that it was built for. Mythra, shackled within her own mind like a spectator to the apocalypse, wished she had the strength to regain control over herself, only so that she could tear her own eyes out of her skull. But even blind, she would see what came next forever. She would see herself, Alrest's hope, indiscriminately slaughter everything and everyone on the Titan below. Her companions, the citizens of Torna, the Tornan Titan itself, Malos. Her transgressions against Alrest burned themselves into her mind. Then, her world was blasted into darkness.